Okay, so we've added our habit adder tag. And what we're going to need to do is to send data from the habit adder to the Dopamina Box tag, which owns this array of habits, so that it can add the new habit to it. So to kick off this process, of course, we're going to need to emit some sort of event from the habit adder tag that the Dopamina Box can listen for. So let's go over here to habit adder, and where are we going to emit the event? Well, we're going to listen for an event when you click this button, right? So we could add @click and then do our logic there to emit the event. But maybe we shouldn't listen for clicks on this button, because what if you typed into this form field and then pressed enter? That should probably also send the event. So a better way to do this, maybe a more accessible way, would be to use a form tag and then listen for submitting the entire form. So let's add in a form tag here. So we'll say form, indent this stuff, and the button, I think we need to add type equals submit to make sure that it submits the form. And then instead of a click event on the button, we can add a submit event on the form. So we'll say @submit equals handle submit. And let's define that handle submit method, def handle submit. And inside of there, we'll do console.log hi, just to make sure that it works. Oh, and we broke some of our CSS. Let me quickly fix that. And now when I click add, we get our console.log with hi, which means that the submit event fired and called this handler. So that works when I click the add button, but it also works when I focus on this form field and press enter, which is one of the nice things about using the form tag with a submit event rather than a click event on the button. But if you look closely, you'll notice that every time this form submits, the page reloads. And we don't want that. We don't want the page to reload, but that's the default behavior of submitting a form. So to prevent that default behavior, the typical way you do this is you use the event object on the event handler, and then on that event object you call prevent default. This is all part of the JavaScript DOM API, not Imba stuff. So now when I click add, it doesn't reload the page. That's great. That's what we wanted. I can press enter, no more reloading. But I want to show you this extremely useful Imba feature called event modifiers. We've seen CSS modifiers. There's also a similar concept for events in Imba. So I'm going to delete this and show you another way to get this same prevent default behavior to work. When we write our submit event here, we can just use the modifier prevent. And you use modifiers by putting a dot after the event name and then the modifier name. So prevent is one of Imba's event modifiers. And there's a list of all of the event modifiers on imba.io in the documentation. So the prevent modifier will do the same thing we just did of calling e.preventDefault. And let's test out that it works. So we'll click add, hit enter. It doesn't reload the page. That means it's working. Cool. So this syntax is very clean, very nice, very easy. But this didn't save us that much code, right? It's not so useful. I like it, but it's not the most useful thing in the world. But there's a lot of event modifiers that do even more complicated things that are so handy. Let me show you an example of one. There's one called throttle. And you can actually chain these together. So we can say submit.prevent.throttle. So throttle is another event modifier that will throttle this event. That means you can't fire this event more than once per unit of time. And the default is 500 milliseconds. But you can actually pass your own time value here, like a function. So I'll put in 1000 for 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. And now when I click add, we get our hi message. But if I click add twice, we still just get 1. So if I click a bunch of times, within 1 second, it only fires once. That's the behavior of throttle. So let me try clicking 3 times. Still just 1. Now if I continually click, we only are going to see that event fire once per second. So imagine that you needed to throttle an event, especially something that fires really frequently like a mouse move event, and you wanted to set up throttle behavior. What a pain. You don't want to have to do that. You can use this event modifier. It makes it super easy. Okay, but we don't actually need to throttle this one, so I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to show you a couple more examples. I'm going to add something to the self tag here. Let's add a click event. And there's a modifier that's called log. It's the log modifier. And I can't tell you the number of times this comes in handy for me to just quickly test that an event is working. So we can say click.log, and you can pass in a value here. So I could say .click. And this event is on the self tag, so clicking anywhere on habit adder should fire this event. And we see the message logged there. So just a quick way to log a value and check that your event is working. Let me show you another modifier. Click events have modifiers such as shift. So now when I click, it doesn't fire the event, it doesn't run the log. But if I hold shift on my keyboard and then click, now it runs that event. So if you needed to set up some behavior for a shift click, all you have to do is add the shift modifier to your click event. Super easy. And you can use alt. There's a modifier for alt. So if I hold the alt key, I get it. If I don't hold that key, I don't get it. Let's look at one last example. We'll do mouse move.log move. And you can see as I move over here, we're firing tons of events, way too many events. Let's add throttle here. So .throttle.log. Now that's firing only every 500 milliseconds. And we could put .alt. So now as I go over here, nothing's happening. If I hold alt, now we're getting the throttled event. Okay, so there's a quick overview of the event modifier system, but all we need to use for our example right now is the prevent modifier to prevent the form from reloading the page when you submit it. So now we're ready to continue on hooking up this event adder so that it actually adds the event. We'll continue that in the next lesson.